This podcast is brought to you by SEATGEEK. Our friends over at SEATGEEK are giving us a promo code of TBAWRESTLING. That is TBAWRESTLING for $20 off your first purchase. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to Gunners R Us podcast, where we are positively Arsenal. And that we are champions. We have lifted the trophy finally. Felt like the longest 5 days of all time between winning the league and lifting the trophy. Albeit sometimes people wait. Sometimes people can wait up to 2 weeks if you win the league early, and you got to wait till your home game. There's been longer waits, but it just felt particularly long. I don't know why. Maybe because of the 22-year wait for seeing it, but it didn't disappoint. And we'll talk all about the last day kind of drama or lack thereof of yesterday. We'll talk about all of that, the celebrations, what it means, my thoughts going forward, and what could happen next year, all that kind of stuff. And I think this is an interesting week because Wednesday we're going to get deep into the Champions League because I think it deserves its whole episode, us winning the league on not winning the league on the last day, but lifting the trophy on the last day at Selhurst Park. That deserves its own episode. But the Champions League and the build to that needs its own episode on Wednesday. And then obviously later in the week, there'll be a Patreon preview of the actual game with PSG in Budapest. So as for now, we're going to get cracking into this last day and what it means. And I think beyond the Champions League and beyond the parade and all these things, we'll get into maybe a look back at the season that was, maybe best transfer, worst transfer, best moment, worst moment, best player, not necessarily worst player, and maybe not even worst transfer, but you know what I mean? Like kind of, we could rank some of the stuff and we can get into that kind of stuff. And I had a really good question from Jack, friend of ours and listener, that I'll get into today as well, and we'll kind of talk about the optics of winning the league and what it means for Arteta and all these other things. But we'll start with the last day. We went in knowing that we had won. It didn't matter what was going to happen as far as the actual game, and that was reminded to us by the lineup because we did see Kepa. Once you saw Kepa, you thought, all right, we get it. We know what we're doing. And I talked about it in the preview, that our depth is so much of the actual team, and I think it was shown in the actual lifting the trophy of just how deep the squad is and how deep the backroom staff is and how collective it all is. Because, as I said, there's not much depth that you don't see often. Maybe Kepa, maybe Norgard, maybe Jesus, but the rest of it is kind of just players that would potentially play anyway. So it doesn't feel like you're overly rotating. It's just the combinations aren't quite there that you would expect in the 100% best first team you could put forward. So we saw Kepa. We weren't sure about the back four, and I think Arteta in his interview before Sky put up the lineup, and he said, well, it's not right, but I mean, you've got maybe a couple wrong there as far as the positioning, because I think a lot of us kind of assumed that maybe that would be Hincapi and Norgard as the centre-backs, Mosquera right back, Calafiori left back, with Zubmendi, Lewis Skelly and Dowman as the midfield three. In the end, Zubmendi played right back, which is going to be food for thought when we get to the Champions League stuff in this week, because I wonder if that was a dry run to see if that's something he could do against PSG. And on that side, he's going to be dealing with, that will be Kvaratskhelia on that side. And the thing is, on the surface, you might think, but I mean, he's a defensive player as far as a midfielder anyway. His biggest attributes are winning a lot of headers and very good at tackling. So it's not the worst person in the world to have right back. I don't think he's the strongest as far as physicality running, trying to get like a recovery tackle, anything like that. I don't think he's necessarily someone who's going to keep pace with Kvaratskhelia, which is a worry. But who is really, if it's not Timber and it's not Ben White, Mosquera being a classic, defender and a centre back and played a lot of games at right back this season, you would assume he will be that guy. But I've also seen players run past him this year that are not in the same league as Kvaratskhelia. So I don't know. I think it's food for thought. I definitely think he was trying to get eyes on Zubmendi in that role. So In the end, Zubimendi was right back. I think Mosquera was centre back with Hincapi. Calafiori left back. Norgard ended up being the 6 with Lewis Skelly as the 8 and Max Damon as the 10. We had Madueke on the right, Martinelli on the left, and Jesus up top. And I must admit, looking across all the games, because fantasy football was an absolute nightmare this week, wasn't it? Trying to pick a player that was actually going to play, and some teams rotated more than expected, some teams didn't. And one of them was, I thought Villa, I wouldn't describe them as going as weak as I thought they might, especially after the week they've had. And I know they went on to beat City. And again, it's not necessarily City. City had nothing to play for. Haaland was not there. He wasn't in the squad. Again, another fantasy football nightmare because you'd have thought, okay, against a hungover Villa, could he score 3 or 4? Our triple captain, someone who didn't play. So we'll see. But Villa rotated enough that I thought, okay, it was kind of the team you would expect them to play last day when they've got nothing to play for, but slightly stronger than what I'd expect, but not strong. I would say that. And then I looked at the Palace team and I thought, God, this is much stronger than I thought it was going to be. And if this was to come down to the last day and they were the two teams that Villa and Palace put out, my word. Because, City wouldn't have lost that game if they had something to play for. I'm fairly certain on that. And I'm sure Palace would have played with a bit more intensity than they did against us. Or maybe not, because they do have a giant game 3 days later. But it was so hard to not imagine what it would have been like, the stress of the last day, if it had actually come down to the last day and we had to win that game. Because, throughout the whole game, it was just like I don't know, for me, I'd skip going, oh my God, can you imagine, that moment when we go 2 up and City go 2-1 down or, whatever like that. The madness that would have ensued, and then them scoring late 2-1, making it nervy. Villa hanging on by a thread, at the end against City. I wonder what nerves would have happened. And again, the games could have been completely different because I'm fairly sure Max Daumann, Madueke, Martinelli, Jesus, Norgard, potentially Zubimendi, Mosquera, Hincapi or Calafiori or Kepa wouldn't have played. So, we rotated 9 of our kind of quintessential starting 11. But I don't know, it was just something that I couldn't stop thinking about. And early in the game, you realised that with the weather and the rotated squads and stuff like that, that it was going to be an interesting game because it was almost played in third gear by both teams. And everyone was absolutely fine by it. And it was very, I'd say, low stakes, it felt. Early on, Jesus gets in, he hits the post. Madueke can't get in the rebound. Then shortly after that, Madueke plays an unbelievable pass to Jesus. And he tries to dink a standing keeper to no avail, nothing. And I remember I was like, God, can you imagine? We were playing for something and those 2 sitters happened. God, can you imagine the stress we'd be feeling? But not just that. Even though there was nothing to play for, I found myself desperately wanting to win the game. I don't know if, again, it's optics. I don't know if it's something that maybe momentum going into the PSG game, even though it's completely rotated. I don't know if it was just I wanted that 85 points just for when they look back, because naturally, you already get in there. Oh, it's the worst league ever. They're the worst champs. So, you get that every year, I think, majority, unless it's City, because no one cares. But Liverpool got the same kind of stuff last year. Liverpool, they got the worst team in history. And the 85 points, the reason I liked it was 85 points just on a visual standpoint is better than what Liverpool got last year. It's better than 6 of Alex Ferguson's six of his Premier League win tallies for winning the Premier League. That was better than 6 of them. And I think it's 33 champions now. It was better than like 12 totals or 13 totals or something like that. So it's not even close. Whereas if there was a loss there, for example, 82, all of a sudden it does drop into that kind of bottom 3, bottom 4 kind of most points gathered, and you do just kind of go, I don't want any arguments, because when you do look at the end of the day, the best goal difference, the most clean sheets, least shots conceded, least XG conceded, most games won, most points gathered. When you look at every kind of stat for the season, we are number 1. The team is dominated that league, and I wanted, no matter how much I kind of wanted Bournemouth in Champions League, things like that, that needed City to win. The ideal situation would be City lose, we win. And it just opens up that point differential that in 20 years or 10 years or whatever it is, you look back and you go, wow, we won the league by 7 points, which is what actually ended up happening with this game. And it just, I don't know, I think it's a good visual representation of dominance. And they ended up being 7 points away from Man United and 7 points away from us. So they were just as close to United as they were to us, which is mad. And I think we need to talk, we get bottle thrown at us a lot. With 5 games to go, having just beat us in a cup final and in the league, City were top. We have to remember, with 5 games remaining. And they lost by 7 points. I just think that's something that needs to be talked about a lot more. They finally napped us to the top. And it finally went up on goal difference. 5 games going. It's a shootout. Who's going to win the league? And they lost by 7 points. There was only 15 up for grabs. Nearly half the points they didn't get. They won 2, drew 2, lost 1. And I think that needs to be talked about a little bit. I know it won't be. No one cares. But my God, can you imagine if that was the other way around? Can you imagine if we got 7 from 15? And again, maybe it is to do with winning stuff. Maybe you get grace. Maybe we'll find out. Maybe we'll find out next year. Maybe you need 10 years worth of grace. I don't know. But in this game, we finally got something because Madueke plays another delicious ball through to Jesus and he hits it near post. It's deflected, which is why it beats Henderson at near post. But we'll take it. It was such an odd... The game had such a strange vibe that naturally, the way even the players reacted to the goal, I assumed it was offside. And they were still celebrating, but a couple of our players just didn't run over. They kind of like threw their arms and then kind of walked back. And I was like, oh, was it offside? And you're waiting for the camera to change. The commentators weren't even like at it. They were kind of like, yep. And you're just like, is it offside? Can someone give us an update? What's going on? And there was like water breaks and stuff. So it just felt very odd. But we went 1-0 up. I got to the half with nothing really happening other than maybe that really good Kepa save. And then second half starts, we make some changes. Gabriel comes on for Calafiori, which looking ahead, I'm assuming, like I was saying earlier, that depth is so kind of used and maximised that we have to use someone like Gabriel for a whole half because we need to get a half out of Calafiori's legs. Because Calafiori, of all the defenders, is the one we don't want playing, right? That's the one we are so nervous about picking up an injury this close to a final because from watching that game, my assumption is that Calafiori is going to be the starting left back. Saliba and Gabriel play centre back, and Rayo be in goal. That's my assumptions from watching that is definite. The right back is massively up in the air. Is it Mosquera? Is it Zubimendi? Is it Rice? We need to have that conversation, which we do not want to have. But or is it Hincapi? Is there a way you could move it? I would have thought, is it Timber? Is Timber available by then? So there's loads of opportunities, but I think I said in the preview was the lineup here and the substitutions will give us a bigger indication of who starts next week, I think. Because mainly in those positions, the Calafiori coming off, as long as it wasn't an injury, I think it was to get a half out of his legs and give him the maximum amount of rest for next week, because there was no one else that could have played left back other than the only other thing he could have done was start Gabriel Saliba. Mosquera goes right back. Lewis Skelly went left back. But I think we're beyond the stage of Lewis Skelly being a left back at Arsenal Football Club. I think next year he'll be in the rotation of the midfielders. I think he'll be used a lot more. And I think he's genuine sliding doors moment in this, where I talked about City having that bottle of 5 games. No one came out and got us over the line stronger than Lewis Skelly. He came into that team at the hardest time, having not really played, and he changed the confidence in that team. And that can't be forgotten, and I think it has to be rewarded with next year. I think there's no reason for him not to be playing more games. He's a quality football player. He's 19. That could be a complete refresh of our midfield. So seeing that was unreal. But getting back to that was the only real way of getting minutes out of Calafiori other than him not playing. So that was the change at half time. The other one was Havertz in for Norgard, which I think Norgard was seen talking to Stevenberg and Arteta at the end of the half. So I wonder if he had picked up a little knock from honestly from not playing very much. But the formation then changed a little bit more because the midfield now was Dauman, Havertz, and Lewis Skelly. So Lewis Skelly was playing the 6, which is very interesting. And it shows, again, the low-stakes nature. But second half, we get a corner. It was only fitting that we get a corner and score from it. It comes in, Havertz back across, and Madueke catches it clean on the full volley. And it's 2-0, and you just kind of think, do you know what, it doesn't really matter, but it does feel good to be 2-0 up and just kind of, that again, that dominance. You just want that visual. You want people from other teams watching their game, checking the score and going, oh, wow, Arsenal really are just dominant. You know, they are just winning. Because 5 days ago, we were having conversations about could we beat Palace? And again, like I said, completely different scenario, really. But still, it's in people's brains. And when you see that, you go, oh, okay, it wouldn't have mattered anyway because Arsenal were just running away with it. So I like that visual. Eventually, Dauman comes off for Eze. Eze comes on to a couple boos before he comes on, but then much larger cheers once he's on the field. Other changes we made were, I think Madueke went down. It didn't look good because he was holding right at the top of his thigh, right where you tear a hamstring. Not a cramp. You don't get a cramp there. And he had just reached for a ball, and he looked fine in, obviously, the post-match. He was in good spirits. Obviously, he would be lifting the title, but, I mean, that close to a Champions League final, that he will probably play minutes in, I assume, unless it's a very cagey affair. And Saka, because, he's coming in for Saka. And unless Saka takes a knock, and it's tight, I can't see him pulling Saka off. But he has done this season in very big matches, pull Saka and trust Madueke. But right before a Champions League final, he's also been called up, which was, in some capacity controversial. So he was getting given 90 minutes essentially, then to lift the trophy, then to play in the Champions League final, then to go to the World Cup. I mean, for a 23-year-old, I mean, he must be in heaven. But to happen, you think, oh, I must admit, I thought, I wonder if he has done some real damage there. And, is this another sliding doors moment where he can't do it and he can't make the final and Dauman ends up on that bench and Dauman does play minutes in a Champions League final? We could be looking at some history. So I don't know. But either way, Gyökeres came on, which it really felt like there was no intention of using Gyökeres because the substitutions were very much built around Jesus staying on as long as possible until Havertz had to move up front. There was no real substitution because Jesus went off for... Oof, that'd be a good... Who did Jesus go off for? Because Gabriel came on for Calafiori, Havertz for Norgard, Gyökeres came on for Madueke after, Dauman for Eze, and Jesus for... Moreno. So we were looking at midfield really of Lewis Skelly, Moreno, and Havertz when Jesus goes off. Havertz goes up front, and then Eze's on for Dauman. So you kind of look at that midfield and you're like, there's no real clear substitution other than Havertz coming back off for Gyökeres to come on because he's not someone who's going to play the wings. He's not someone who's going to sit deep. So I just thought, there's no way he's using Gyökeres, which again was another indication to me. And he didn't use Rice, he didn't use Saka. Obviously, they'll be starting next week. Trossard didn't get used. Saliba wasn't even in the squad. But the way he kept Gyökeres, his intention was to have him not play any minutes, I think, until the injury to Madueke, tells me that Gyökeres is starting next week, which is very interesting because I think a lot of people were probably thinking he was preparing to play the old Saka, Odegaard, Havertz 3 over there and Trossard and Rice and Zubamendi again and back to all that kind of situation. And Lewis Skelly playing 90 minutes again made you feel like maybe he's not going to play next week, but he also played Lewis Skelly pretty much 90 minutes 3 times in 7 days, and that's what got us over the line in the semi-final and in the Premier League, and he didn't rest him then. So he might be looking at him going, you're 19, you've hardly played some football, you can get a load of minutes out of you, and there's other people that need it out of their legs more than you, and I trust you're going to be fit for next week. So I don't know. But the Gyökeres one, it really did scream that, because otherwise, would you have just taken off Jesus at 60, giving Gyökeres 30 minutes to try and get a goal? And he does have an attempt, a good one-on-one. Other than that, you could tell he kind of wasn't prepared for the game, because he was in third gear moving around and still managing to get away from people and kind of bundle people over, but he wasn't in it like he usually is. And I wouldn't want them to overextend themselves a week before a Champions League final when we're 2-0 up. And it really doesn't matter if we end up losing at 3-2 in the last 5 minutes, which nearly does happen because Mateta does get one back. It's borderline offside. It's given on. Good header. And then within a minute, I believe Pino scores a volley. It comes off Gassand, who's offside, and it gets ruled out. And again, because of the commentary, I didn't know it'd been given. I didn't really understand. All I noticed is it never went to 2-2. It just stayed at 2-1. But they were still celebrating. And I thought, I don't know what's going on. And eventually he said, it's been given offside. So it's just odd because, again, when it went in, I was like, it's disappointing because, again, that dominance, I really wanted to win it. But it didn't matter. Especially that close to the end. I thought, I just want to see him lift the trophy now. So there's no issues. Very late on, Gyökeres hits a really nice ball across the goal. Eza for almost a tap in, and it gets saved by Henderson, which would have been an unbelievable, because as soon as that gets cleared, the whistle goes. That would have been the last kick of the ball. At Selhurst Park was Eza scoring before lifting the trophy at the team he joined at the start of the season. Genuinely, there's been some really odd stuff, almost, dare I say, biblical. And the way Timber, as the amount of Bible talk in that team is madness. But it really does seem like they almost know something, like they almost like smirk. And the fact that, like Rice said, it's not done, and as I said, it's all going to work out. And then we now hear about these kind of conversations that happen behind closed doors, and them saying, we just got to relax, it's all going to be fine. And they're all kind of like, and I said a few weeks ago on the podcast, like in that run-in where, again, like I said, City went out top and we were in a shootout of who could score more goals. The players looked more relaxed than they have all season. They kind of, Arteta was laughing on the sideline. I thought, what has happened? Because in December, they were so stressed out. And you could see it, you could feel it. And there is like this weird kind of thing, like almost like there's something that's working with us to help us. I don't know how to explain it. But it does feel like that. And that is a moment I thought, oh my God, if that happens, like it's like they've written a script. Like the fact that it's come down to Selhurst Park, which, by the way, 2 years in a row, Selhurst Park has hosted the champions for the last game and had to do a guard of honour, which is crazy. They had Liverpool there last day of the season last year, and then Arsenal this year. But it was just, it's just something with it that you just kind of think, oh my God, there's like a weird confidence, and it's only going to get more now that we've won the league. And seeing that result and then looking across, obviously we all had to then watch the last 10 minutes of that Tottenham game. West Ham did their job brilliantly, 3-0. And then we were just waiting for Everton to get a goal and make that last couple of minutes uncomfortable. And watching the last few minutes, apparently Everton were really shocking throughout the game. But in that last 10 minutes, they missed 2 clear headers. And then Tyreek George, Kalinsky puts one over, tips one over the bar from a really good effort. And you just think, my God, if they'd got a goal even earlier, like imagine that was 1-1 when everyone turned on, and then that George effort happens, and then header happens. That would have been madness. And some of the winners of the day, like Brentford not winning, Brighton getting beaten badly, Chelsea losing, obviously, to Sunderland, Everton not winning. There was so much that happened that allowed Sunderland go from 10th to, is it 6th or 7th? 7th, I think they ended. Which is incredible. This is a team that everyone assumed would go down. They tried a new strategy of kind of coming up and just buying a new team, essentially, including Granit Xhaka. And they ended up coming 7th and getting Europa League with Bournemouth. We got 5 teams in the Champions League: Arsenal, City, Man United, Villa, Liverpool. In the Europa League, we're going to have Bournemouth and Sunderland, and then Brighton get the Conference League, who they win. They get that by 3 goals over Brentford, who needed a point in their game against Liverpool. And obviously if Chelsea had won, Sunderland hadn't, Chelsea would have taken Europa League and had 55 points. Even a draw would have got them would have got them Europa League as well. And Chelsea lost to Sunderland. So it's just incredible when you look at the table, and there's, we're not talking, there's been so much talk about Arsenal all year, constant. There's been so much talk about Pep leaving, Bruno Fernandes' assists, or maybe lack thereof breaking the record this year, depending on if they give that as an own goal. But Man United's like resurgence. Villa kind of dealing with Europe and still coming 4th. Liverpool fumbling, but still getting into Champions League. Bournemouth, Sunderland, and Brighton being unbelievable. Brentford being unfortunate because they've been good all year. But Chelsea there in 10th. is crazy. And I know they've got a history of this with their owners and previous owners of almost like winning the league and then coming ninth and then winning Europa League, then doing this. And I mean, they're a team that won the Club World Cup and the Conference League in the last 24 months. They're such a bizarre team. And now they're 10th. And you just think Enzo Fernandez could leave, Cole Palmer could leave, and they're just going to throw money at someone else. And it's such a weird team. And Alonso's a good manager, so you might get something out of them. And similar to United this year, who dealt with nothing. They lost both of their domestic games their first time in. So they only played 40 games this year total. Chelsea won't have Europe. They could have a cup run. They usually do. But even if they don't, they could be a team like United where they can just focus every 7 to 10 days, get a result with a good manager like Alonso, unbelievable funds, and they could be a problem next year. And I'm not necessarily saying they should win the league. There's no reason why they can't with the amount of money they put in, the manager they've got. But there could be an issue like United this year. Like United are 14 points off the lead, but they're only 7 points behind City. They won 20 games this year. That's a fair old chunk of games to win. And then teams like Fulham, Everton, whatever, Palace. But Newcastle down there in 12th has to be talked about. A -2 goal difference, 49 points, only 9 points off of the drop. The 14 games won, which seems they must have lost a lot of games because 14 games is a decent chunk. But and then you look down the league and Forest did really well to kind of avoid all that while dealing with Europe. And then Leeds ended up being 5 points off of a top half finish, a point behind Brentford. But they end up 14th, just 2 points behind Newcastle and Everton. Unbelievable season considering 2 months ago everyone had them as one of the teams that could go down with Forest and Spurs. Palace weren't even being considered. They ended up above Palace. And then obviously Spurs end up holding out and winning 1-0. Having scenes like they've won the league, which is incredible. And again, love to see what happens next as far as dealing with those celebration police, because my word, have we dealt with it for a long time. If we had done that, my word, it would be meltdown today. But they send West Ham down, which is unfortunate. Jared Bowen's interview was probably a little bit of life given to West Ham fans because he kind of, without directly saying it, implied he's going to stay, which would be huge for them. But 39 points, they were 17 points clear of Burnley, 19 points clear of Wolves. It was clearly two teams that should have gone down, and it was a fight really between them and Spurs really. I'd love to have seen Spurs go down. Obviously I'd missed the North London derby, but it would have been worth it just to see them go down. But when you look at that lead, there's some questions to be asked across that league, including Chelsea, Newcastle, Tottenham, Liverpool. I think some big questions. I think huge shout-outs to teams like Brentford, Brighton, Sunderland, Bournemouth, even Villa and United doing what they did. And City did, in the end, lose to Villa, which was Pep's last game. And, I'm glad he's going because he's just a world-class manager. But before him, Pellegrini and Mancini were still winning leagues. He isn't, everyone's saying, oh, with Maresca, that's it. It's like, well, no, Maresca's a decent manager. It's not just that. It's the way that whole club is ran is actually, take away the charges and all the financial part, it's ran very well and it's kept very clean as far as manager to manager. It's like plug and play and they do such a good job. And the only thing I'd say is similar to when Ferguson left and not so much Klopp, because I think if Klopp stayed one more year, potentially they would have won that league and he would have gone out then. And then they would have had this year with Slot. Because when Ferguson left, what he did was he would kind of bring youth through, make a couple marquee signings from other Premier League clubs or big players from Europe. They would have a 3-4 year run. And at the end of that time, those young players were now older players. He'd bring in a couple more established players and he'd promote youth. And he'd kind of have this rotation going consistently. And that would kind of keep him at the top. And when he left, he never really redid it. He kind of let everyone kind of get to that. The youth guys were now 31, 32 kind of area. The guys he had brought in were 31, 32 and leaving and at the end of their contracts. And he hadn't bothered with the youth. And he left them in the lurch. And, looking back, Moyes actually did a very good job to try and rescue that. And so did Mourinho and Van Gaal. And, across the board, they tried. It's now getting back to where they might have a shot at kind of doing something. But it takes a while to rebuild. With City, they have just these endless funds and really well ran, business. But they are also not, who is there to replace Bernardo? And I know people say Cherky's there and stuff like that, but Cherky, character-wise and work rate-wise and all these things, he's a flair player. Him, Doku, Marmouche, Savinho, they're unbelievable. But they're flair players. You need people like Bernardo Silva who tie that team together, like David Silva did before him. Rodri's at the end. He took over for Fernandinho, and it looks like they're going to bring in Elliot Anderson. So maybe that's that kind of process there. Donnarumma, again, is a guy who's actively said he's going to go back to Italy eventually. He's just come here for a couple of years to win some trophies. Nico O'Reilly's a big part, but we did also feel that about Rico Lewis, and he's kind of disappeared a little bit. Oscar Bob. But when you do look at that midfield, De Bruyne was never truly replaced. And I don't think they're going to be able to replace Rodri to the level. I don't think they can replace Bernardo Silva. So when you do look at it and you think of Haaland, you think after Pep, is he thinking, yeah, I might do another year, but I might move on. There's also deducted points over their heads. But either way, he has kind of left him in a little bit of an odd position. But I also do think they're just so well ran that whoever you put in there might have a run at the league. And especially as the league is a little bit in flux. I think new managers to a lot of the big teams. De Zerbi's brand new, really, if they're going to challenge ever. Carrick's new. Alonso's new. Slot is in his third year. You can't imagine that's going to end well. It just feels that way. Maybe he'll prove us wrong, but then Maresca's new. Arteta's now one of the longest running managers. If Howe doesn't get sacked, he's the longest running. So you just, I don't know, when you look across the league, and there's people like Bournemouth manager Areola's moving to Palace by looks at it. Glasner's moving on potentially abroad. Who do Bournemouth bring in to deal with that double? Do Brentford get away with another year playing the way they did this year? Who knows? Sunderland, how do they deal with having double game weeks and all that kind of stuff? We do not know. So it does feel like it's in flux. It does feel like it's there for the taking. And the current champions, who are us now, we have an opportunity here to start a dynasty. I'm not saying they will, but I think the opportunity is there. And the Cronkies, who did walk the trophy out to the pitch for the players, which looked, I think, very cool. It did look. It was a good visual, I think. It was just, I don't know. It just seemed like a cool. I don't know. It was. I think it was different, and it was so different because it was in the corner of Selhurst Park, and the whole of this title has felt very. Like I've said before, Joe and I say new shoes for Christmas. It's like a saying we say, which is like sometimes you don't get to pick the things you want, but they become you anyway. They become a part of history and the fabric, or whatever. I want these brand new black shoes, and someone buys you yellow shoes, and then forever in time, they kind of hold a place in your heart, and people call you yellow shoes, and these kind of things. That's why we say it. And I think that's what this star race has been, because it ended up winning it without playing. You thought that's disappointing, but then how iconic the pictures and the moments of the players going to the ground, the 100,000 people outside the Emirates, the visuals of all the players, win the dog. There's so much cool stuff that came from that. Then we had this slight come down of a couple of days. Then we've come back, and then all these new pictures of them with that trophy and actually holding it, and it just seems real, and it kind of feels like AI. It feels like, when you watch the FIFA end, when FIFA does the cut screen and it's Arsenal, and you're like, yeah, that'd be nice. And I've thought about it a couple of times at different times over the last 3 years where I allowed myself to imagine it. And I was like, oh, God, I'd love to see that group pick it up. I'd love to see Gabriel holding it like Sol Campbell. Now we've seen it. I'd love to see Odegaard lift that because I think he deserves it. I'd love to see Saka holding it. And where we've got, and what we're getting is just as iconic as what you expect. And, the way they shoot it, you don't really know where they are. But it was really kind of different seeing it in the corner of Selhurst Park, and the away fans have been unbelievable all season. So there's something nice about it being the away fans, who are probably the most rabid of our fans. And it was just so good. And the backroom staff all wearing different players' names on the third kit, and then the first team and the manager wearing the red with Champions 26 on it. It was just one of those kind of moments in time. We had to wait for it as well, didn't we? Like, it was such a that gap between the end of the game and that was just, that again felt like another one of these waiting things. We waited 22 years for the title. We waited 5 days to actually lift the trophy, and then we waited another hour after the game. We get presented the trophy, and we were presented the trophy by Emmanuel. Emmanuel, if you don't remember, did that video with Arteta where he talked about how he plays for North London United and he's a centre forward and how he celebrates. And I said I want to see a celebration. He's come to training at the Emirates a couple of times where Odegaard trained him around. He's kind of been a part of it, and I think Arteta kind of promised if we ever did it, he would be a part of it. And it was a really nice shout because he plays, like I said, for North London United, which is a team made up of people with different disabilities. Emmanuel has Down syndrome, and him just getting to pass out those medals was awesome. I think it's just a nice little, again, a classy touch that I'm sure won't be talked about, but we know, and I think it was just really cool to see. And then Odegaard eventually comes up last, and we get that match of the day shot lifting that trophy, fireworks, all that kind of stuff, and then started essentially the parade of chants and pictures. And like I said, no one, there's no other team, Fashion FC, that would have thought about what pictures they wanted, how to get them, all that before the game more than this team. And they were as organised as the set pieces as they were for getting the pictures done. And it, like I said, Gabriel doing a Sol Campbell, Dowman kissing the trophy in front of the fans, Saka and Eza, Gabriel and Eza, the centre-back, Saliba and Gabriel. Then they added Raya. The Gyökeres doing his celebration in front of the crowd with everyone doing it. There was all the, and then he even did the whistling walk off with the trophy thing he did at Sporting a couple of times. So there was all these different kind of things they were getting. Lewis Skelly was in every single photo, it seemed. There was the Bible study group, there was the dog walking group. There's all this like different stuff going on, and it was just, I don't know, I just reveled in it really. And it's just, and the Emirates was filling outside again. The parade's gonna be absolute chaos, I think. If we win that double, I think it'll be absolute. It'll be just, I don't even know how to explain it. Wild. Even if it's not, it's gonna be wild, and they're gonna just chant and whatever, because it's no easy feat to win the league. It's a really no easy feat to win the Champions League. So the fact that we've got ourselves in a position where we've just, as Arsenal fans, got to enjoy Tuesday, got to enjoy the 4 or 5 days of going to work or school or whatever it is you do, kind of not gloating, but just because I think that's been the theme of this, isn't it? Not to gloat, just to allow people to have to accept it. Because I do remember group chats this time last year when I was sending congratulations to Liverpool fans, and all they were saying was Arteta can cry more, or Arteta's the bridesmaid, or Arsenal bottled another one. While we were like 10 points behind them in some capacity, we weren't even in a title race. And that was what was met with. This year, obviously, no congratulations. No, that's awesome. Well done. Enjoy it. None of that. But also, I'm not saying anything. Do you know what I mean? Because I know they're seeing the scenes. And they'll try and talk it down and be like, oh. I saw already a Liverpool fan say that it was the least viewed title ceremony ever on Sky. Firstly, don't care. Secondly, it's because all our fans weren't watching the TV. They were all at the Emirates or outside the Crystal Palace Stadium, which is unlike most other teams. The other reason was it also got community noted, and it was actually the most viewed title parade, title lift in the last 10 years or something. So all of those things are hilarious. And again, that kind of social media world, they'll kind of try and use it and they'll kind of deflect it. Psychologically, it's funny because, they'll start kind of talking about how amazing other teams have done, but just can't bring themselves to do it. There's a really funny video on socials, which was the Sky presenter that can't quite accept Arsenal won it. And he keeps going, yeah, they won it, but, they did it their way, I'll say that, and really, does it mean much unless they do it maybe next year or for the next 10 years? They got to do it really for us to kind of be like, and at the end of the day, they did it their way. So it's, is it really a full win? And it's just like, that is exactly what we're getting. And it's so funny because before we would have to kind of argue our points. And now the same people that said we couldn't argue those points are trying to argue their points. And we can just sit there and smile and sit there and laugh and just be like, sure. Because it doesn't, Like, unbelievable showing. And again, and Goldbridge said it, He said he goes, I'm jealous because the way in which Arsenal turned out for that when we won it on Tuesday, unannounced outside the Emirates. He said it was like the 90s. It was like a throwback to the 90s or Italy or something. And he said, I wish our fans had that connection. And that's what I know they're all feeling. They just can't talk about it. And it kind of makes it sweeter that not saying anything. It's just like, yep, let them sit in that, which has been unbelievable. And that's, I think that's been another great kind of part of all of this. And just to enjoy that and it just accept it. And I mean, if you'd said, there was a picture of Saka and Eze holding the title in front of the crowd all chanting for Saka. And if you had shown me that visual 12 months ago, so May last year, end of last season, and someone just quickly throw me 2 seconds of that and cut it off and said, just wait, I would have been like, one, why are we at Selhurst Park? Why is Eze there? And surely we didn't win the league. That's what I would have thought. Surely that isn't to come. And if someone whispered in my ear, then you can have a Champions League final 7 days later, I would have been like, what? And it's funny because the players have talked about it, and we've all talked about it all year on this podcast. All Arsenal fans amongst ourselves, we talked about it. And Rice and Saka have talked about it because there've been a load of really good sit-downs with Laura Woods, with Arteta, Sky with Arteta. Rice and Saka have done multiple bits of media in the week. Frimmy, obviously Arsenal have done their own stuff. But the consensus, and again, in the post-match on Sky with Ian Wright and Richards and Redknapp, they kind of mentioned that in like January, they were unbeaten in the Champions League, top of the Premier League, in the FA Cup, in the Carabao Cup final. And he said there was like a negativity cloud around the whole club. Like from pundits to everything was just like, yeah, but if they don't win all four, it's like, well, none of you had us winning anything at the start. So all of a sudden we have to win all four for it to be impressive. And there was this weird cloud, and they alluded to it, and they said that we felt it because we had played so good football for so long of that season, and we were in everything. I mean, some of the football we played throughout the season was unbelievable, and then it started to slow down, and it was when that negativity kind of took over in that cloud. And it's so ridiculous that a team at the top of everything and in every competition in January into going into February had that cloud, and that cloud drove us to playing worse. Us losing a Carabao Cup final, us getting kicked out of the FA Cup, and then losing to our rivals. And, the iconic moment, it could easily have been "Don't Let This Slip" by Gerrard, or Kevin Keegan said, "I'd love it if we beat them." Things that precede unfortunate events. And Rice said, it's not done. And they said it was performative. And like he said, he's like, there's cameras everywhere. Like, I'm just talking to my teammate. I don't know they're shooting me at that time. Like, I'm just talking my heart. And he said, and after that match, we had another meeting between the players, and the other one apparently came after Wolves, that 2-2, which was essentially there's a negative cloud following us, and we don't know why. We couldn't be doing better, and people are still not good enough for anyone. And we need to just enjoy it and relax. And this was around the time that obviously we learned that Eze went into Arteta's office and said, you need to give us more time, give us space. We need to enjoy this and it will all work out, essentially. Which is, again, going back to the script written, that song and him joining and then it all working out. And it's not done, it is now. There's so many iconic things that happened this year. And again, you'll forget about the games where we narrowly beat Newcastle, or the moment where we lost to Bournemouth. All these things become the past, because if we did lose this league, we'd be thinking about them for years, as we do Son's miss, and we think of 3-3 against Southampton. We think of Villa 2-0 at the Emirates as reasons why we lost things. These things will disappear into history because we won it. And Eze going into there, and then they both kind of said, Christian Norgard was actually the first person to speak in that meeting, and what he said was kind of something that was very good for the group. And then I think they said Eze closed it after Odegaard spoke, and what he said kind of relaxed everyone into like, it's going to be fine. And he does have that energy, Eze, of just like, it's going to work out. And I know that's kind of a pun now, but it does, and it goes back to what I said earlier, which was just kind of like, he'll be fine. Just relax. It'll be honestly fine. And it does give you this weird confidence, especially now it's actually happened. You kind of go, well, okay, maybe I could like lean into this kind of relaxing nature, but and they did, and you did see it, and it's just interesting that outside sources, then they tried to rattle us. And Saka talked about it this week. A lot of pundits have actually said, they were like, I don't think a team in history who've won the league have ever come under so much criticism throughout a whole season or throughout a 5-year span, but particularly this year. And even when we were top of everything, we couldn't be doing better. They were still wasn't good enough. And a big reminder, obviously, just to not listen to negative noise. But they've overcome that. They've overcome, if anyone was going to bottle this year, it was us under that pressure that was put on us for no apparent reason. And they've overcome that. And to overcome that in higher stakes is a good sign to what's come, because that pressure will be released, and that pressure will be less next year, we hope. I work at an animal rescue, and I do a lot of adoptions. And when you do meet and greets with dogs, this is my analogy. You won't put them in a more stressful situation together. They've just met. I'm new to their dog. They're new to the new owners. You're in a yard which has got dogs all around. The smells in there, the smells around. It's loud, sensory overload. You're putting them in the most stressful situation. And if they get on in that time, or they ignore each other and they're just absolutely chill, it's such a good sign that they're going to be absolutely fine once you get them into a relaxed home with none of those smells, none of the pressures, get to know you each day. And that's what the season was like. It was like a cauldron of just pressure. And they've overcome it, and they've lifted the biggest prize in English football. And that was the thing, seeing them hold it, that was so surreal. Like, we've seen FA Cups and Carabao Cups, and we have seen this before. But it doesn't seem real to lift that one. The one with the crown on the top, the huge silver thing with the crown. It just felt not real. And the Champions League would feel even less real. But I think to us fans in the UK, I know a lot of people, we've got listeners in Australia, South Africa, Russia, Canada, America, Brazil, everywhere, if I've missed you out. As I look on our analytics, I love seeing the amount of different kind of countries that have listened in the last week. But in the UK, I think we don't see anything bigger, including the Champions League, than that league. That Premier League is so iconic, and the Champions League is massive. The European Cup, because Champions League's only new. It's always been the European Cup. There's no bigger major in world football, but there's something about that Premier League. Not to say that I don't want the Champions League. We desperately need it, because if we were to bring that in, Champions of Europe, you can't sing that. You can start chanting things like that. Once you've won that, that's the thing that people can't. That's the one thing that no one, everyone had on us, was a barren spell of not winning the league, which I find still a wild argument, because, all right, it's a barren spell for United now. It's a barren spell for Bournemouth. They haven't won the league. They've done really well. They've got a good manager, good players. They should win the league next year. Like, it's such a silly conversation. Just because we've won it before doesn't mean they're more like they should win it again. Like, why are Leicester not winning it this year? They're in League One. Football, there's no guarantees anywhere. But when you do look at it and you go, this is the Champions League, this is the Premier League. If we can somehow eliminate both in 1 year, and that kind of banter of you're in a barren spell, you've never won a European trophy, or the major European trophy anyway, it kind of silences everyone at once, and no one can say anything. Like I said, you can't look at any metric that we didn't dominate this year. Goals, set pieces, conceded, defence, everything. Points. Europe haven't conceded an open play goal in the knockout stage. Conceded 6 in the whole competition. Top of the league. Champions League final. I mean, we couldn't be more dominant. But that doesn't speak for much unless you lift that trophy. And that double would be so sweet, because take away the double, where we sit right now, no team in the Arsenal's history has won the league and then got to be in a European final. The Invincibles couldn't do it. The team 2 years later went to the final, couldn't win the league that year. The teams in 98, 89, 34, 34, 35, 36, the 3 back-to-backs in the 30s. None of these teams have ever won the league and been even in the final of the Champions League. So already this team's history, because to mount a fight, especially in the English sides, like when you do look, you've got a couple treble teams in Man United, Man City. Man United also won the double before of the league and the Champions League. Usually when someone like Liverpool win the Champions League, they fall out of the league a little bit, because they put their eggs in that basket. It's very hard to to hold both of them. Not to mention we were in the Carabao Cup final and the quarterfinals of the FA Cup, but these two particularly are the hardest. In these last 7 days, we've won one and we're in the other final. To get to that point is, maybe PSG have done it 3 or 4 times. Maybe Milan and teams like that have done it. Barcelona. But the Premier League teams, it's very few that have been able to be in this situation. And even as a fan, it's so lovely to be in a final, having won the league and just kind of, well, if we don't win it, we still won the league. That was still the main objective this year. If we win it, then it's history. It's the best double you can do, physically. The only thing that could be is a treble or a quadruple. And again, very rare, air to do those kind of things. And I don't know. I just can't. It genuinely feels like AI. It feels like FIFA. It feels like something. And I can't figure out the fact that we got a 16-year-old who actively contributed this year, kissing the trophy. He's the youngest, goal scorer in the Premier League. He's the youngest starter in Premier League history. Youngest Premier League winner. Win the Dog is the first dog to win the league since our dog in 1933. So, what could you not love about the different cultures coming together outside the Emirates on a Tuesday night with no violence? The bringing Emmanuel with Down syndrome out to help with the lifting, bringing all the backroom staff and family out and giving them shirts and letting them get pictures with the trophy. Having a dog, Kyle, shout out Kyle, obviously, who also works mates with Joe and I. But dogs are a big part of us. And people love dogs. We have a dog. People made fun of the dog. And like Rice said, she's had a hard time. But she's been running around more than ever in this last week. There's so many things to love. The British core, there's they're also likable British players as well. They're not they're just very sensible people. And there's so much to like about it. And instead they've got caught up on set pieces, which apparently matters. You shouldn't score set pieces. But the guy that just broke, maybe didn't break, but leveled the assist record, got 65, 70% of his assists from set pieces. But apparently he's the player of the year. So it's just very, you know what I mean? We've talked about it for years. You can shine a light back on the people that are saying the stuff with active evidence and proof, and they'll still turn around and have some nonsense to say that would be we won the league and we dominated all these metrics. We did all these lovely things in the community. We did all these things. What do you think? Yeah, but you haven't won Europe. You win Europe. Yeah, but you haven't done it back to back. It will move. You're crybabies. Your fans are rubbish. All right. Do you know what I mean? That's where we're at. And I did say I was going to get to Jack's question. Again, shout out Jack, because he sent a good question. I thought it'd be a really good conversation. Right off the top of my head, I have no clue what the question is, because I completely forgot about it. So it says this. So I'm going to read this out loud. Debate question for the next pod. I'm seeing loads of people saying now that we've won it, the shackles could come off and we could go on and boss the league for a while. As I mentioned earlier, the dynasty. Now, I'd love that to be true, but were people not saying the same thing when Liverpool won it so long back in 2020? They were good after, but never fully came back. And maybe as it was the COVID year, it wasn't the same. Even when people won it last year, I didn't think people saying they could create a dynasty like they are with us. Maybe they were, and maybe it's Liverpool media I wouldn't have noticed, but this feels different. So why is that? Because it coincides with the potential downfall of City, Pep plus charges, and the other teams around us in a rebuild, as I mentioned earlier. And I think that's a really good question. Yeah, it does feel like, other than City, who had already been maybe won 2 back-to-back, they were like, is this a dynasty? I've never seen a team win it once after challenging for 3 years. So this is 4 years of hard graft. No one's really, other than City winning it 4 years in a row, not many people come in the top 2 4 years in a row. Because it's really hard to sustain that without a year off. Luckily, our year off was last year. But we happened to come second. So I think maybe there is a little bit of truth to that. And then this is the win, and maybe we've got it all right as far as Berta and the transfer window. I think because I think people were saying Liverpool were going to go on to do so good things after 2020, but with the COVID year, City came back strong and won it 4 years in a row, right? Once that happened. So it was difficult because City came out of the blocks, and this was deep in Pep and nearer, closer to the end of Klopp than the start. And then last year, I don't know, because they won the league so comfortably last year, and then they spent $500 million. And I had conversations personally with people who we all agreed, other than the treble, it'd be a failure. They've won nothing and come 5th. but scraped Champions League football because Villa won the Europa League. That's really bad. And I think Slot said some weird things. Like he talked about set pieces again about Arsenal this week. And they said one word to describe the year: injuries. All right. Well, we had more than you last year and we came second, got a semi-final of Champions League, and people still told us we underachieved. And that wasn't having spent $500 million after winning the league. If next year we have the same injuries as you and we do what you did and come fifth and we don't get anywhere in anything else, I'm saying it live here that I'll be disappointed. I would say that's not good enough relative to the injuries, because you spend $500 million, you have the ability to build a squad. They didn't build a squad; they bought individual players. We built a squad, and as I was saying earlier with the celebrations, you can see the squad build because you can see how many players are there and how we could field that team that beat Palace on the last day. That is different to the team we see week on, week out. And we've dealt with massive injuries. We're still dealing with massive injuries. When we went to international duty and loads of players pulled out and it turns out they were really injured, but that's not allowed. We've dealt with horrific injuries this year. I think we're second in the injury table after Tottenham. And hey, look where they are. It's because we built a real sustainable squad with really good kind of morale, ideas, and they've just cultivated something, I think. So I think it's just nonsense saying that his injuries and that's what led to him having a bad season. I called it in the summer and said they're going to struggle because that is awful squad building. They're going to have to build a squad around it. They're going to spend another 400-500 million this year to get kind of close. And also I think with last year when they won it, yeah, it could have been a dynasty, but I think we all could see Van Dijk was at the end, Salah was at the end, Robertson's at the end, Trent left. They're in a situation now where they're going to have to. That is an actual rebuild because you know it's like us in 7 years' time, Saka being 32 and going, I'm gonna retire, and Saliba being 34 and being like, I know I've given up a lot of goals this year and I'm slower, but I'm still trying to kind of aura farm and do weird celebrations. But us not having anyone ready to replace. And, you know, I know they've got Rio and he is very good. He's very young. You shouldn't be placing that kind of stress. He should be playing a lot of games next year, but he shouldn't be the guy carrying a burden of a title race, for example. But it's just different. I think you could see it around the world, whereas you look at ours and you look at the ages and, you know, TBAWRESTLING 31, you look at the defence, they're all somewhere between 21 and like 26 in Gabriel. The midfield, the oldest players are like 27 in Rice and Odegaard, other than Moreno, who's 29. No, I don't know Odegaard's 31, but of the ones that play, and the rest of them are like 23, 24. The forwards are all 23, 24, except for Gyökeres, who's 26. Jesus is moving on. He's the oldest at 27. It just feels like they're very well placed. Like, you know, a player's prime years, I'd say, are like 24 to 28. Most of our players are in that gap for the next few years. And with people like Waneri coming back, Lewis Skelly coming into form, Dowman on the brink. And by the way, Dowman's 8 years away from the start of his peak. So, I mean, we could be looking at a generational player or someone who maybe doesn't fulfill it. I mean, it's very young to put any kind of pressure onto it. But, I mean, Saliba and Gabriel, if they wanted to stay for another 3-4 years, they can. Raya could. You know, we're not on the verge of losing these players unless we want to build them. And you look at Mosquera and you think, God, he's a player, and he's 20. You know, Hincapi is 22. Calafiori's 24. There's some real interesting depth and age and the amount of minutes they've got in there and the quality they're playing at. And, you know, every year you kind of almost need to move on a couple and bring in a couple and let them build. And then, you know, like we said, 4 years ago, if you had said that we finally win the league 4 years later and we didn't have Zinchenko or Ramsdale or Jesus or Xhaka in that team, I would have said, well, how would we have replaced them? And if you'd said, you know, a year ago or 2 years ago, players like Tierney, or maybe not Tierney, that feels slightly harsh, but Tierney and Smith Rowe and Waneri wouldn't be there, or I'm trying to think of the other guys. Even last year, if you'd said Lewis Skelly wasn't our left back, I would have been confused. So, you know, you evolve and you move people on, and you move people on at the right time, you know, whether it's Odegaard or Havertz or Eze or whoever the player is. You have to be shrewd. You don't want to lose them all at once. You don't want them all to kind of get to the end at the same time. And I do think when you do look at it, and you look at Bertie, you look at a young manager like Arteta finally achieving what he did, the size of squad, the collective unit of the crowd and the players, it does look like it's on the verge of some great stuff, as well as obviously everything happening elsewhere, like I mentioned earlier, with the managers and players and people moving on. There's no givens as well. Like next year, Chelsea could be runaway champions because they play every 9 days on average. They end up buying Mbappe and someone else, and he just absolutely takes the league by storm. And we go, oh yeah, didn't see that coming. Football's football. City could just carry on as robotic as usual. They don't get any points deducted. So many things can happen, but it just means that we've got the opportunity, because I don't think there's a player in world football who doesn't want to come to Arsenal in a minute. When they see the scenes outside the Emirates, they see London, they see the fact that we got it over the line, it's possible, the type of players we've got, I think it's a place you want to be at. And that does feel special. But football does move quick. What would the conversations be in October? I do not know. And that is why football's mad, because that's why you got to enjoy the moments. And that's why you got to enjoy this week, guys, because we are gearing up for a Champions League final. And we are Premier League champions. I cannot believe that those are the words that I'm saying that are true. But here we are. So I'm hoping you've enjoyed that. I'm hoping you enjoyed the celebrations. I hope you can walk around smug for the next 5 days before we have to get prepared for a very stressful game, because we've dealt with so much stress for 3 or 4 weeks, and then this week's been so unstressful, and the match was so low stakes and so low energy. It's so weird to now be like, oh yeah, now we need to go play our best ever football. It feels very odd, and who knows what's going to happen with that. Maybe it was a detriment to win the league the year you get to a Champions League final. I don't know, but we will find out Saturday. And on Wednesday, I will jump on to start switching focus completely to the Champions League, how we've done all year, where we're out on injuries, anything that's come since then, and get prepared. And then obviously a deep dive on the Patreon at the end of the week going into the Champions League final. I hope you've enjoyed it. I have. It's been good to kind of speak out loud about the trophy. I'm going to go watch as much content as possible, and tops now, get some of these photos onto cards, please. I'll buy them all. So enjoy your week. I'll be back then, and shout out to everyone around the world that listens to Gunners Rust, because we are finally Premier League champions. Bye-bye.